We're now live.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Community Environment and Partnerships Committee this evening. I am Councillor Vaux, the chair of this committee, and I would like to welcome everyone to the meeting. It is being held virtually and in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the government regulations. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting is finished. Councillors who sit on this committee are identified by name on the screen, and I will introduce the officers by name before they address the committee. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the Council, and they should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the Member Code of Conduct and not allow members of their household to distract them during the course of the meeting. Can members please ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or on silent? Members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they have been invited to speak by myself as the chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote taken under the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand or by using the electronic function, and should only speak when I as chair invite them to do so. The officers present will only switch on their video link during the item that they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as chair. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda who will address the committee by audio link. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off their video link if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or other personal interest in an item on the agenda. The councillors can switch on their video link when I call the next agenda item. Voting will be taken by roll call, and I will confirm the recommendation proposed to the committee before the voting begins. Can each member indicate whether they are for or against the recommendation or whether they wish to abstain? Hopefully we will not have any IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, that they should immediately advise the Democratic Support Officer and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Thank you for waiting for that quite long statement. So if we start at the top of the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions. Unfortunately, Councillor Follett-Maitland has unavoidably been delayed. She intends to join us a bit later, so she will come when she is able. And Councillor Court is slightly delayed. Oh, he's here. Fantastic. Welcome, Councillor Court. Are there any declarations of interest for this meeting? No? Lovely. There are no urgent matters that I'm aware of. Ellie, I assume nothing's come through that requires attention?
Yep, there's no urgent matters.
Thank you very much. So if we could move to item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December, I would like to move that the minutes of the meeting be signed as a correct record, and it's only accuracy that we can talk about at this time. Is everyone happy that we sign them, or I sign them? Yes, got no shakes. Yeah, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you very much. I did look through the actions yesterday. I think we're just waiting to hear whether the committee can be involved in the draft pilot report for the BVA, which we discussed at the last meeting. I'm sure people will recall the committee asked if they could have a sight of the conditions of the pilot study. However, I haven't heard back, or Ellie hasn't heard back yet. So when we do, we will pass that on. So we move to item 5, a presentation from the Citizens Advice Bureau. I'd like to welcome Graham Hatcher to the meeting, who is the Chief Executive of the CAB. I would just like to say that Councillor Wooldridge and I are both appointees from the borough to as sort of remote trustees, advisors, whatever you want to call it, to the CAB. We're not full trustees of the CAB. We're on their extended trustee list. So Graham was invited to come to hear, so we could all hear a little bit more about how the CAB supports our communities. And in light of the grants paper, which will be going to the committee, the budget will be going to committee in February for council, it felt like a timely opportunity to ask one of our voluntary sector partners who the borough does invest quite a significant amount of money in each year, to come and talk to us, to share with us what they do. So I've asked Graham to take about 10 minutes or so for his presentation, and then we'll have questions and answers. So I'm going to butt in, and hope you don't find it too rude, Graham, if we go over about 10 minutes and just give you a sort of heads up, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine, Jenny. Thank you very much. What I think I can share my screen, can't I? Am I right in thinking that? I should add that I'm also the Joint Strategic Manager for Citizens Advice Tadley as well, because we work very closely together and share costs where we can. I'll share the screen now, and hopefully you can see. Can you see a PowerPoint presentation placed to be great? Apologies, I've got quite a few slides here. I tried to cut it down, but I thought it was, I know that there's some councillors who are very new and having spoken to one or two, may not be fully aware of Citizens Advice and what we do. So I thought it'd be just very helpful just to give a very brief overview. So that's what the initial slides are very much about. The other thing I'd add is that I've been at Citizens Advice Basingstoke for 14 years, and every day I'm amazed about the work that we do. It's just incredible. But prior to that, I was in the commercial sector. You know, I mean, one of my jobs, for example, was as a purchasing manager. So I'm very commercially minded as well. But I've also been involved in volunteering for a long time. Anyway, I better move on. Hopefully, yes, good. So one of the things that many people are surprised by is that we are an independent charity, not a local charity. Local company or part of the government. But we're also a member of the National Association of Citizens Advice Basingstoke. So we all share the same mission and values that are shared on that screen. But it also means that we have the support of a national organisation, but have to fund ourselves, which is always a challenge. So I thought I'd share this slide with you, because you can see as part of a wider service, it's not just, there's a lot of services that you might not be aware of that can help you or your residents, and also that one thing I haven't put in there is that millions more than the people who come to us actually access the national website for information, and there's lots of information on there for councillors as well, and of course the millions who do include Basingstoke residents. But it's very much, you know, we're a local service as well, as you can see. Another thing that people don't realise is that our twin aim, people always associate our work with giving help and advice, but they don't know about the research and campaigns that we do. As a charity, we're very independent and impartial. And because of that, and because the database that we've got is enormous, I've been told that it's bigger than DWP's database. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But we have a huge amount of data that we collect nationally. And this means that we can provide sort of independent viewpoints and reports to central government. And as you can see, this has a much wider benefit to lots of people. And there's a few things listed there. And including, you know, everyday stuff. When I say everyday stuff, it's stuff that, you know, everyone has to do, like the loyalty penalty for homes and insurance, which means that everyone has been now treated equally. You know, anyway, I better not get on to too much. And I just wanted to I think it's very easy to think that we all work in isolation, but actually collaboration is very important to us as well as an organisation. And we work very closely with Citizens Advice Tadley. We share posts and we also share the website. You know, we do whatever we can to reduce our cost. But it does mean that there are new opportunities and different ways available. And I wanted just to highlight the Household Support Fund, because that's part of the Connect 4 Communities programme run by Hampshire County Council. But across Hampshire, there's £200,000 that's been administered and given out by Citizens Advice to help people with fuel vouchers and things like that. As I mentioned, I do represent Tadley as well, so I just wanted to show a brief slide from Tadley. Most of the slides are about Basingstoke, but I think it's important, you know, also to sort of show, you know, how much work we do with other organisations and the outreach and the role that we play in the community. And I think that's this slide from their annual report also demonstrates that. And I'm sorry, I'm rushing a bit because I know I've only got 10 minutes. There. Locally, this slide is of Basingstoke, and the figures here are enormous, but they are just based on Basingstoke. They are calculated using a Treasury-approved model, and based on the work that we do. And you can see it really does have a massive financial impact, the work that we do on our community. I also wanted to sort of highlight the high standards that we have to work to. What I haven't got there is that we're also monitored by the Financial Conduct Authority and the MAPS, Money Advice Pension Service. And this is really important because I've heard some, I mean, I can't name people, but I've heard some horrible stories where people have been given the wrong advice and it's had dreadful consequences for them. You know, so we take the quality of our work very, very seriously indeed. And all our volunteers have to work to those quality standards. And I think we're about the only organisation where we have monthly random checks, independent monthly random checks. A bit about volunteering, because I think volunteering is so important for our community. I've been involved in volunteering for longer than I care to remember, and I don't want to give my age away, but it's way over 30 years. And I think it's something that we should all be proud of. And I think it's one of the great things that the council do support the voluntary sector so much. Ourselves, we've got, as you can see, people from all walks of life. And we currently have 72 people, staff and volunteers working from home and doing an awful lot of hours. And of course, volunteering in itself has many benefits in sort of improving people's health and well-being. We've seen how it's helped giving people real life experience, particularly if they've been, come from university and done a stint with us. It's helped people get back on their feet in confidence. And improve people's employability. You know, there are so many benefits. I'm sure if you spoke to any one of our volunteers, they could tell you what a difference it's made to them. But there. Anyway, moving on. This is a snapshot of what our clients. I hope, by the way, that you all received our annual report, which has got a lot more detail on it, and read some of the case studies, because figures don't show the story at all, but this shows the diversity of some of the work in that we cover the whole of Basingstoke and Deane, and how we support local councillors and the work that the council does in general. I appreciate the fact that the ward information there is not completely up to date, but it's a report that's run by Citizens Advice. I don't have any influence on that. And I'd also add that the ward information we don't collect generally, and our work has evolved, so it's a lot more digital now, so we don't actually collect routinely collect all the information. But I hope that gives you an idea. And as you can see, the age of our clients varies greatly. And I did check it out, and we definitely did seem to help somebody who was 104 years old, which is, I think, is absolutely amazing. But we also measure the diversity of our work, by the way, because equality and diversity is very important to us. Again, I've mentioned Tadley's project work in outreach, and these projects that I've listed here, this is what Basingstoke's been involved in. You can see there's a wide list of things. Again, this was in our annual report, but this is this work is dedicated and provides extra support to our core work, extra resources, both financially and in people. And also helps us reach the most vulnerable people. We have targeted, an example of that is the food bank outreach service and the over 65s work that we do. You'll also notice there again, we've got the Surviving Winter Fund, where we can give wards up to £100 to keep people over the age of 60 warm and well and fed. So that's great to do. Right, anyway. I don't know how I'm doing. I hope I'm doing all right on time, but as I mentioned previously, and you've seen in the previous slides, the hard outcomes of our work in terms of financial benefits can quite obvious at times. But I don't think that tells the whole story at all. And I've gone to so many I've done so many stands in the 14 years where people have said how our help has sort of helped relieve their stress, and they feel so much better, even if we've told them that we're wrong, because we don't, we're about telling people their rights and responsibilities. Sometimes we're not always the nice guys, but it's important that people understand that, so they don't lose their homes or have false hope. But as you can see there, on average, people come to us with about 3.5 different advice issues. But with people health issues, it's more like 5 practical issues that they deal with, and they find it very difficult in the first place. I'm always reminded that it takes a lot of courage to come and ask for help in the first place, and I'm really glad that we're there for them. But there was a research done by Citizens of Ice, and you can see there that whilst 97% of people said that the problems affected their lives and caused anxiety and financial difficulty, 60% with an existing health condition said I helped improve their mental health, and 40% their physical health. I actually think those figures are probably a little bit low, and there's a lot of evidence of how we've improved mental health in other reports over the years. I'm almost there, Jenny, by the way. You'll be pleased to hear.
Yeah, if you could, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. This report was done in September 2021, and at the time it was just saying, look, hang on, there's a lot of changes, and actually people, particularly Citizens of Ice, people who come to Citizens of Ice are going to struggle even more. And since then, of course, we've had there's been lots of news today about the cost of living and things like that, and the demand for our service is just increased dramatically. So I just thought I'd sort of put that in there because we're constantly trying to catch up, but we don't have enough resources. And because I read some of the the cuts, the reports that have been produced, I thought I'd share with you at very top level our income stream and some of our challenges. Fundraising has always been very challenging. For the last, since I joined, that was one of the first things I had to do, was diversify our income streams. At one point, Basingstoke and Dean's grant, which we're very, very grateful for and couldn't survive without, was about 95% of our income. It's now about 50%, though that varies from year to year, depending on what projects drop in and out and funding. But as you can see, things are tough. We don't have sufficient resources to meet our demand. there are lots of impacts and cuts and costs outside of our control. You know, for example, since we've got the strategic grant, which hasn't increased for 8 years, one of the things that we didn't do before, but was put in place, was workplace pensions. So that's added to our cost. I'm commercially minded. I'm a hard negotiator, and I've really cut our cost. And this year we've lost staff who we've decided not to replace because we can't afford to. But you know, they do. We're very much under pressure, and 83% of our total costs are for salaries, and no one gets paid particularly well for Citizens Advice, considering the work that they did. And next year, we know, because I mean, if you just look at the donations, you can see there's a private legacy of 20,000. There's different projects of 130,000. We know that some of these aren't going to be repeated. We know that our income from this year, there's 157,000 plus that won't be repeated for next year. So things are very tough for us, and you know, we could do so much more. So it's very frustrating. So Jenny, that is a whistle stop blow through our presentation, which I hope people found interesting.
Well, that was superb. No, well done. Thank you very much. You did very well. You were so close to the end. I thought I wouldn't give you a push at 10 minutes. So you did very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And then we can go to screens and we can see what questions are being. So are you happy, Graham, if we ask a few questions and follow up things?
Yes,
yep.
Absolutely.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So Councillor Ganesh, you were first off the mark. We can't hear you, Councillor Ganesh, or at least I can't. I don't know why.
No, I can't.
I don't think your microphone's working, Councillor Ganesh.
Now?
Oh, it is now. Yeah.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks for the presentation. That was very useful. Sorry, I had some issues. I couldn't get the slides. Would you be able to share that with us or with the chair, if it's possible? Thank you. We have directed some people or some of my residents towards you in the past, but we haven't had a chance to sort of experience of seeing. I'll be happy to come and speak to you at some point if that's okay with you, and spend a day volunteering.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ganesh. Councillor Mahaffey.
Sure. Graham, thank you for that presentation, and thank you and well done to everybody at CAB for the work you do. We know CAB quite well. I'm in Silchester, so we're quite close to Tadley, and you do come to us every year for a small grant, and wherever we can, we do our best, but it's not very good. Strikes me though that as borough councillors, the best thing we could possibly do is help in communication. So the first question for you is, do you have a one-pager or a leaflet or something like that electronically that you could send to all councillors, so that we can then put it on our Facebook sites and send it to our parish councils for them to distribute just on the work that you do? That's request number one. And the second question is sort of more looking at the data. Strikes me that you have an awful lot of people coming to you, and you're clearly underfunded and overworked. Has there been any analysis on the type of people that are coming to you? And when I say type, I mean people that clearly you can't help everybody, and you will be passing an awful lot of people on to other organisations who are better positions to help those people. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the communications that we can put out there, is there any mechanism that we can get those people going in the right direction first of all, without coming via you and overburdening you?
I would say actually how it works is that it's the opposite way around. People go to other organisations and they're actually sent to us, and we don't turn anyone away. You talk about demand. We obviously do monitor, you know, our clients, and you know, we've throughout, you know, our service, we've we've changed how we work and things like that. And one of the things that we're worried about is how we reach the most difficult people. I think the only people we really I mean we do provide help to the deaf community, but I think that's the community that's hardest for us to reach. But in terms of demand, I'll give you a very brief example of how demand is increased on our service nationally. In 2011, so we were part of Advice Line, which means that people can call us free and we all work together to answer those calls. And in 2011, I think the demand for Advice Line was 70,000. Last year it was 1.6 million. And we're answering, and I'm very embarrassed to say this, we're answering at best 50% of the calls that we get. We could do so much more. It's not like a business, with a business, if you produce more widgets or have more demand, you make more profit. In our case, our costs go up and we haven't had any, and it's completely the opposite. So it's a real challenge for us. The leaf I have circulated, we are incredibly stretched. I mean, there's full management, there's nearly 100 staff altogether, or volunteers working together, and there's 4 management people, and we don't all work full time. But I have circulated both the PowerPoint, this leaflet, which gives an overview of all the different services, which is a 1-page to everyone. So you should get that, I hope.
Thank you.
And I also apologise because I didn't mention the local welfare employment emergency welfare scheme, and I also noticed they didn't have the supported by Basing Stoke and Dean logo on it. So I've sent you the wrong version. But yeah, so the fact is that people come to us rather than us turning them away, and ultimately, and we don't actually signpost people to many other services because quite often we can help them. And yeah.
That's useful. No, I don't get me wrong. I do know you don't turn people away.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether or not it would be something that we could do to route them in the right direction in the first place. But it sounds like that's the appropriate approach. But lovely, thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes.
I think, Graham, what you would really appreciate help with is publicity to encourage volunteers. Is that right?
And donations.
Yeah, donations. Yeah, fair enough.
Because nobody gives us money. The number of times I've stood outside Tesco's or run a store, and people just don't think of us as a charity. We're not one of those fluffy charities. They don't make the association. They're always thinking that we're a government department. So we have to be very creative in how we get funds, and also for our core, like the salary cost and things like that, people, there aren't that, it's very difficult to get funding for. So we have to sort of do cross charges where we can and buy secondhand goods and, whatever we can to, or better still, get them for nothing.
What I think would be requested, if possible, is if there was a short piece of text that councillors could use in their local publications and Facebook pages and various, encouraging people to volunteer or to donate. That I'm sure that there would be lots of people who would be happy to do that. I think that's what Councillor Mahaffey was alluding to.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wooldridge.
Thank you, Chair. My question was going to focus around the finance and really tight resources as well. Well, I've got a couple of questions, and you've sort of mentioned that it's going to be really difficult for you next year, Graham. Are you able to go into a little bit more about that? Is for example, you mentioned previously about the help to claim fund sort of drying up. Do we know whether that's definitely happening yet, and whether that's really going to have a big hole in your finances? And I guess if so, have you thought? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you think the impact is going to be on the service that you're going to be able to provide? I'm saying this especially being mindful of the cost of living crisis that's been sort of referred to earlier, and in particular sort of the expected increase in energy prices, because I'm sure people are going to come to you about that. So if you can go into it in a little bit more detail, just so that the committee can really understand what it might mean to our residents if funding is going to be sort of hit in the way that you've hinted at. And then I've got a specific question about, you mentioned earlier the household support fund, especially helping over 65s with energy. I would find it help to know a little bit more about that. So if you've got that information tonight, great. If not, maybe we can have that after the meeting and then we can distribute it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So thank you, Karen. It is difficult for me to go into too many things, and some of the stuff I can't mention for commercial reasons or for reasons of confidentiality, because there's quite a bit going on at the moment. But we do know that we're going to be hit by a lot of projects ending, and that 157,664 includes some of the things that you've talked about. So that isn't a made-up figure. That's precisely sort of income that we've got in this year that we won't have next year. We are working on it. We have got some reserves, a very small amount of reserves that we put aside to try and bolster our service and retain resources where we can and staff where we can. And I'm working very hard on other projects. But the fact is that we will carry on, but we won't help as many people when there's more people wanting our help. And that is so frustrating. The return on the money for the council alone, if you want to be commercial about it, is enormous. The impact on people's well-being is enormous. And we are there helping, and we haven't got enough resources or people to do it. As I say, I'm absolutely appalled, that we are struggling so much for resources when I know we could do so much more. We could help so many more people. So sorry, I'm trying to be neutral on this, but it's we've changed, we've cut costs, we're doing what we can. So yeah, there isn't a simple answer, Carolyn, because how long is a bit of string? We've had Kickstart people, a couple of Kickstart people this year, and we've got a couple of Kickstart vacancies where we're going to get some temporary additional resource, hopefully, and hopefully that will almost the cost of it will almost wipe the face. But of course, that involves investment in itself. So that's really it's not really worth, it's hardly going to matter. And we are, pushing for new volunteers, but again, that's enormous investment in time and that. But having said that, a lot of our volunteers either leave very quickly or stay for a very long time. Our longest volunteer is 28 years.
So in summary, you're saying that basically it's going to be, logically, a fewer people in, residents in the borough who really need the help, who just won't be able to get that help. It is the essence of it, really. And depending on whether, you can pick up the call on the day with their phone, and whether they keep phoning, and they've got the ability to keep phoning, because they might not have money on their mobile phones, etc., to do so. So is that pretty much the reality of it?
The phone calls are free, and we investigated and so we got some money to buy soft phones and things like that, which covered. I'm always been creative in trying to sort of be as efficient as we can with our cost and service, and we also do a lot of email responses as well and things like that. I've sort of gone through that. As regarding both, you mentioned the Surviving Winter Fund and things like that. Well, the fact is, if you send somebody to us, and you could I'd recommend at the moment, because we can't answer all the phones, that we do know definitely that if you go do our contact sheet or send us an email via our website, you will get a response. you know, we will give money out to people over the age of 60, and that can help all the councillors. And I talked about the support. Sorry, I've forgotten the name of the fund now. We've got so many different funds.
Household Support Fund, I think it was.
Thank you. Household Support Fund. That's £200,000 that's going to be spent before March. I know we're getting through it, you know, across Hampshire. Citizens Advice officers through Hampshire are getting it. But again, if you make if you refer somebody to us, then there's a process, because we, you know, obviously we've got to be mindful of the fraud and things like that. But there is a process, fairly straightforward, you know, where we check the eligibility of somebody and then get the money to them. And I would also say about the Lose project as well, which I've shared with you as well, because you know, we've already given out some money on that as well, including people who have been homeless and rough sleeping and have moved into empty properties. So we've got some, you know, supporting them there.
It may be helpful, if you don't mind, just circulating the information on the Household Support Fund, especially given the sort of time limit to spend that. I'm sure there's quite a lot of councillors who could you put that out and really sort of try and get some people who can.
Sure. I will have to see if I can get hold of that, because that's actually operated by East Hants, and we've got the guidance how it works. I don't know if there's a public document. I have to find that out, but I'll make a note to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that fine, Councillor Waldridge?
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. Graham, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for all of the work that Citizens Advice does. You were absolutely invaluable during COVID. I remember referring an awful lot of people to you, and they were so thankful for your help. And you were always spot on, so patient, gave them brilliant information. And I know that you do that day after day after day outside COVID too, so thank you. You mentioned about getting a significant return on investment for the work you do. And I wonder whether you would like to talk about any specific things that you would like to do in terms of, you said we could do so much more. Can you think of some specific additional services you would like to provide, and why they would provide financial benefit for the council?
Well, the simple answer to that is I like to have more people on the phone, and that would help more people, and the funds, and then you will get, you know, the wins and gains for our clients. It would take the work, the formula that for the returns I don't have. But, you know, the savings for government and public services, where we will, you know, where we're supporting the work that you do, are difficult to measure, but there is a formula based on the work that we do once, you know, at the end of the year. So I can't give you a precise figure on that. But the help, you know, we're not helping as many people as we could. It's as simple as that. And if we could employ, you know, just a couple of people on the phone, you know, the phone service would improve considerably. You know, that's just one example. We're in constant talks with Citizens Advice as well, by the way, about how we make, you know, improvements as well. But yeah, it's really about getting resource to help people, because we're overstretched, and volunteers are absolutely brilliant, and they do the most amazing job, as you highlighted. You know, they're very patient and kind to people, and it's been really stressful for them as well. So yes, extra resources, please. You know, I mean, we don't. It's very nice of Jenny to say about the social media, but I don't actually even have anyone who does social media, really. You know. I've got so many hats. It's ridiculous. And you know, I would say almost that we're in survival mode rather than being productive. You know, that sounds a bit harsh, but it actually feels that way.
I think if you could possibly provide us with some information about return on investment, that would be really helpful, so we can see the tremendous benefit that the council gets from the work that you do.
Yeah, I'm just struggling
No,
to.
don't worry, you don't have to do it now, but just
No, I'm struggling to think how we could do it. I can obviously, I've given a couple of samples. If we had a couple more people on the phones, funding to pay for a couple more, that would make a huge difference, and then that in turn would have but how I evaluate that or give you the value on that, I'm not too sure. Sorry.
There was one of your slides talked about returns and savings on
Yes.
things, and I think that might have been drawn from national data. I'm not quite sure, but I suspect.
No.
Was that national or was that about Basingstoke?
That was Basingstoke data.
Yeah. So there is data on one of the slides there, Councillor Compton-Burnett, that will provide you with some of the information that you've asked for, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's worth remembering that the strategic grant that the borough gives to the CAB is essentially for the core service and the running of the overheads and things. And then the other project work that might be related to the loos or to, I don't mean the LEW and other projects, that those are additional monies for specific projects, but the overheads keep trundling on. And I think that's the bit that the CAB has found difficult because it stayed static, and they've had to have efficiencies to come in order to keep the organisation going, but it inevitably eventually cuts back on the meat of the organisation because there's a limit to what you can pare back on efficiency. So I think that's the essence of it. Councillor Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick one. Graham, I'm sure you're already aware of this, but I'll say it just in case. Greenham Trust, very generous organisation. You've approached them for funds in the past? Or
I have.
Okay. It's just that they're very good at match funding, and this year is they're targeting. Can't remember exactly the parameters of it, but it's basically young people and young people's projects, that sort of thing, which I would imagine there's a lot of overlap with the sort of stuff you do. So I'll leave it with you. But
I'm just to let you know, I am very aware of that, and we're outside. I have been in contact with them. Tadley do very well from that, but we're outside their boundary.
Well, no, I was going to say Tadley should be within the boundary.
But because there was a project that they contacted me about where I was trying to get additional housing support. I haven't gone into too much detail because a lot of it's difficult for me to do so in a public meeting. But we do have some areas where we're not fully funded either, and I put a Greenham Trust did contact me. And when they asked me about, who the area that we helped, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we'd like to help you, but you're actually outside of our boundary." So that's that's one good
focus on Tadley, and I think you'd be within it. So.
No, Tadley get it. Tadley do have a totally different do it. I've just because I don't have all. I've concentrated on the Basingstoke, but I know that Tadley are also under the same pressures as we are. But thank you very much for highlighting that.
Okay. So I think we've finished all the questions, unless anybody else has anything they wish to say. I will thank Graham very much for coming this evening and sharing a very interesting presentation. We've all learned a lot about what the CAB does and the pressure that it's under. I mean, I think that your passion for what you do comes through very strongly. And I think the appreciation of the committee for what the CAB, the support that it gives to our communities, I hope has come through to you, and our appreciation of that. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. So I think Councillor Poland is having some issues with his internet, but he's hoping to get back on once he has got it sorted out. So we will move to item 6 on the agenda, which is the update to the committee on the council's response to fly tipping in the borough. We have Councillor Eachus, who's the Cabinet Member for Recycling, Waste and Regulatory Services, and Rhys Gilbert, who's the Environmental Health Team Leader, to take us through the paper. Just to remind us that members are being asked for their views on the paper, which is being presented for information, noting and discussion. And it comes from a council meeting last year where it was suggested that the borough might benefit from a fly tipping strategy. And that's what generated this paper together with the Hampshire strategy, which is an addendum to the papers. So Councillor Eachus, would you like to start this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So thank you for the introduction. As you say, this is a paper, and the purpose of the paper is to update the committee on our response as a borough to fly tipping in Basingstoke and Bean. And it's really just for the committee to ask questions, for us to provide you with updates, and then take on board any comments that you may all have. There was something that went to full council last year, but we already have a strategy in place, a fly tipping strategy, and this paper was always going to come early this year just to provide members with an update. Obviously, fly tipping is criminal, it's unacceptable behaviour, it's a blight on our countryside, our environment, everywhere, towns, wherever it's done, it's wrong, and it poses a risk to people's health and costs landowners significant amounts of money to clear. We as a council, we accept that fly tipping, there are incidences where it has increased, and it's perceived to increase all the time, but actually we have a strategy in place, and I'm pleased to say, and figures are in the paper, but these figures might be slightly updated to what's in the paper because we've had some information more recently. There are 27% fewer incidences of fly tipping than this time last year. So as I say, any fly tipping is bad, but it's a positive thing that it has decreased. So obviously our strategies are working. It's hard to prosecute people because we need the evidence, and our officers work extremely hard to gather that evidence. And in fact, we've got one of the highest prosecution rates in the whole of the county, and we do have to thank residents for bringing the fly tipping to our attention, and those residents that are able to be witnesses to it to help those prosecutions move forward. I think Councillor Roy, you did mention Hampshire County Council. They do have a fly tipping officer, and they've got their own strategy, and we work very carefully with them. They have an overreaching strategy which they work with all of the districts and bring everybody together and share best practice. So we work very closely with them in that regard, and they update their fly tipping. They review it yearly, and they bring updates to project into I think every year, and on other occasions if need be. I won't go into all the data and the facts. As you say, we've got the Officer Rhys here that will do that. Tom Payne is also with us this evening to assist if required, but I'm happy to take questions once Rhys has given some more information.
Sorry, I turned myself off. Thank you very much, Councillor Eachus. Rhys, are you happy to take us through the paper? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening. Fly tipping is the generic term used to describe the unlawful disposal of controlled waste. So I'm sure we all understand and know what it is. The council is proactive and organised in its response to fly tipping issues. But we continue to face significant problems with this type of behaviour around the borough. This is mirrored nationally, with figures increased substantially over the most recent monitoring periods. DEFRA has recently published its data for 2021 that shows on a national level fly tipping incidents increased from 975,000 incidents in year 2019-2020 to just over 1.1 million in year 2020 to 2021, so representing roughly a 13% increase. In terms of actions to deal with fly tipping in the borough, the increase and progress we've made with our enforcement work is much improved since our last report to this committee. Successful prosecutions have increased year on year, which now stand at 39 since 2018. Most recently, at the beginning of January, we had our first success at Crown Court trial where 2 persons were found guilty of 16 charges of fly tipping. This case represents a significant and complex investigation and case file, and we're hopeful for significant sentences for both parties in that case. The success we've had with enforcement actions has been an important part of our approach to communications. One of the big improvements there's been over recent years, and has been critical to all the cases we've taken, is the level of witness engagement there has been in supporting proceedings. This is something that we really struggled with historically. With regular convictions, it's been possible to regularly highlight the consequences of actions, of such actions, and promote compliance through these messages. It's also been an opportunity to highlight that public engagement and the cooperation has been excellent, and at the same time demonstrate to would-be witnesses that the council will act. So in addition to those convictions we've already had, as things currently stand, there are another 6 cases currently in the court system, and 10 more in waiting, and many more under investigation. In terms of communication, there's been regular messaging to the public over the last 12 months around various waste issues, which has been overseen by the colleagues in the communications team. Themes have included fly tipping at bring sites, how to report fly tipping, success of prosecutions, checking of the public's responsibility in checking for waste carriers license and anybody they might employ, fly tipping and litter have been regular messages in customer service posts on the different social media platforms throughout the year. Some of the feedback from comms is that now that we're in a position where there are fewer and less regular messaging in relation to the pandemic, the difficulties with the waste collection services have eased, and restrictions on accessing the HWRCs are removed. There's going to be more of an opportunity for more targeted and routine messaging around the issue of fly tipping, which is something we look forward to doing. In respect of bring sites, fly tipping at bring sites, it's something that has been well documented. And this is reflected in our prosecution figures, in as much as 10 of the 18 convictions since this time last year relate to offences at bring sites. To further tackle the issues at bring sites, we are committed to purchasing redeployable CCTV, and there will be a new part-time officer designated to the implementation and enforcement work around that. To date, unfortunately, there have been 2 unsuccessful rounds of recruitment, but we continue to review that, and options on how we resource that are currently under review. In parallel with the existing funding for that CCTV, we've made a bid to DEFRA to boost our capital budget on that. If we're successful, our aspiration would be to have a CCTV deterrent being retained at, a CCTV deterrent at all of the 6 retained bring sites. As you'll no doubt be aware, that the changes to the bring site provision in the borough are underway, which the waste team are overseeing. Anecdotally, that the feedback to me on this has been that the issues and reports of fly tipping at those locations where banks have been removed, the situation is much improved. There are some sites that are still proving problematic, which is why there still needs to be a focus on tackling those locations and the behaviours at those locations. In terms of data, the trend in fly tipping rates fluctuates, as is shown in table 1 of the report, which is on page 6 for your information. It broadly shows that the fly tipping trend there's been in recent years. I say broadly, as there are some anomalous figures in the data set, as well as the impacts we can speculate that would be attributable to the events of the pandemic and various restrictions there have been. The data in this table is the data reflects the data that DEFRA publish on an annual basis, or the data that we report to DEFRA, and each local authority reports to DEFRA, which is published on the DEFRA website. The nature of its collection means it's prone to human error, which largely explains the jump that you will see in years 2019 to 2020. That error was corrected for 2021. So the figure you see there, which is a reduction on the previous year, is more representative, but is unlikely to be a reduction in true terms. To be as confident as we can be in the data we collect, we monitor 3 metrics, which are shown in tables 2 and 3. That is the data I just referred to, which is the incidents of fly tipping that the street cleansing team clear and remove, and that's what they report to us. The reports that we receive from the public is the second metric, and the third metric is the weight of the waste that crews are collecting on the vehicles and taking to the various waste disposal facilities. As is highlighted in paragraph 4.10 of the report, for the current financial year, there's been a sizable downward trend across all 3 metrics compared to last year. Although the information wasn't available at the time the report was finalised, we now have the data for Q3, and the same pattern in that downward trend has continued. In terms of the incidents, so what that means in real terms is in respect of the incidents that we've cleared and that we report to DEFRA, there have been 27% fewer incidents so far in this financial year. Reports from the public are down 33%, and the weight of the waste that we've collected is down by 30%. Where the true figure is that lies in that, well, I couldn't be sure, but in terms of the general direction of travel on this year compared to last year, it would appear favourable. In terms of next steps or ongoing steps, our enforcement work and response to fly tipping will continue as it has done, if not more so, as it has done over the last few years. We continue to work in partnership with HCC and other agencies in the county, and this stems from the coordinated work of the published Hampshire County Council strategy. An example of our joint work with other agencies is described in paragraph 5.3 of the report, and a very recent successful prosecution came from that work, and a significant fine was levied on an unlicensed waste carrier. HCC hope to update this strategy, their strategy later this year, but the format and timescale for that are not yet known. The recruitment to the environmental enforcement officer role is something that we will be focusing on to ensure that we can respond to and get in place the CCTV deterrence that we're seeking at the bring sites that are being retained. In addition to that, in the last week, the community safety patrol officers, community safety, have initiated a project to tackle fly tipping. We are part of that project alongside colleagues in the street cleansing team and the communications team, and we'll support them with the work they do there and enforcement interventions on a local level. Regular messaging, as I alluded to from the communications team, is something that will be programmed in on a more routine basis, and that will continue to, well, we aim to continue to promote compliance through that, through the various social media platforms and messages to put out. In conclusion, we've developed our enforcement response and have shown that those who don't comply with the law will be challenged through the available legal routes, and this work will continue. As is reflected in the data, the fly tipping continues to be a problem behaviour. We are seeing some sign of reducing incidents this year and a downward trend, but numbers continue to be very high, and as such, it remains a priority. And with that's my summary of the report.
Thank you very much, Reese. I did it again, forgot to unmute. That was very good. It's a very good paper, thank you. Very readable, lots of data in it. It was very interesting. Thank you very much. We have a few hands up, so I will move into questions. Councillor Mahaffey, you were first off the block.
Thank you, Chair. Reese and Hayley, first of all, well done for this paper. I think it's really good news. It looks like we're moving in the right direction, which is very gratifying indeed, because I think fly tipping is the scourge of our society. But it occurs to me that, and this is based on no factual evidence, just my gut feel, there are 3 types of fly tippers. You've got your first type, which is kind of otherwise respectable residents who turn up at the bring sites, find it closed, think, oh, well, I'll just dump it here anyway, or they see a pile of waste somewhere, I think, well, I'll put my extra bag on top of that and it's not making any difference. And that group probably or possibly don't even think of themselves as fly tippers, don't even think they're breaking the rules. And what you said about publicity, social media sites, I think that would tackle that group very well, and the evidence that you've presented suggests that it is working, particularly the fact that you've said 10 out of the 18 convictions have been at bring sites fly tipping. But then you've got the second and third group, and these are the ones that affect me more directly, being in a rural site, is the sort of family or individuals who have some waste there and think it's okay just to chuck it in the back of the car, drive down the road into the countryside and chuck it out the window, domestic stuff. And then you've got the third type, which are the really unpleasant fly tippers, who are the man with the van. You know, I'll cut your hedge for you, and then we suddenly find it in our ditch down the road. And these are the two, the second and third group are the ones that really bother me, because the dumping is invariably in the ditch, so it goes straight to the watercourse, and very often around the lanes around here it blocks up lanes for forever. And I don't see any differentiation in the paper, and I'd like to know what we are doing to focus on groups 2 and 3 rather than the first group, which we seem to be quite successful on. Yeah, please, thank you.
Who'd like to pick that one up?
I'm happy for Reese too, but just for me to say, I think I agree with Simon. There is those 3 different types, and I think when we were doing the Bring Bank report, we said fly tipping at Bring Banks is still illegal and it's wrong, but it's a different type of person thinks that the Bring Banks fill up and just leaving a bag by the side isn't fly tipping when it is. And I think, and Reese will correct me if I'm wrong, our strategy does deal with those. I mean, this big case that we had in the Crown Court very recently, and that was serious, awful fly tipping. And as we said, 16 incidences. So we are doing that, and that's what the strategy is doing. But Reese might be able to give a bit more detail around how we do that.
Thank you. Reese.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yeah, completely agree. You know, there is certainly a spectrum to the nature and types of offences that occur, and how and why people are motivated to do what they do in terms of depositing waste in different locations. As Councillor Reach just alluded to, the prosecution outcome in Crown Court just last week is a result where we have targeted and we have successfully taken to task that organised crime element, where people are, you know, the man in the van model of fly tippers, and you know there are 16 charges persons were found guilty of, but you know I think we would be kidding ourselves if we thought those were the only 16 offences that those individuals had ever committed, and as such, you know the act, the conviction represents a significant disruption into the nature of that illegal element of waste collection and disposal services that was being offered. We've come from a position where we weren't able to progress many cases because of the lack of engagement we had at that time from the public in terms of willing witnesses, and the cases that we have had have been able to take certainly has the change in the public's approach and engagement with us has certainly changed that. We take every case that we can, and they cover the spectrum of the sorts of incidents that that you describe. So we haven't yet got to a point where we are refining or ruling out or favouring one type of action over another. Where the evidence is there, we want to, and the witnesses are willing, we want to make sure we take those cases forward, and that's really the test in terms of what we do, and those cases that we take.
Can I just add a comment to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm guessing the way we should be targeting this is asking residents to ask for a waste transfer notice of any people that they have come knocking on the door or doing odd jobs for them. So that in terms of social media, in terms of getting the message out, I would imagine that's the most that's where we should target our resources the most.
Yeah, communication messages frequently talks about or encourage residents to ask for waste carriers licenses and be curious about where the waste is going. Waste carriers licenses are pretty easy to come by. They don't require a fit and proper person test or any such thing. So even if somebody does have a waste carrier's license, we would encourage residents to be curious about where the waste is going, how it's going to be disposed of, and so on and so forth. So yeah, certainly that question is the first. But yeah, it's
thank you. Super.
Yeah, just to come in there, that's right, Simon. It's quite a big thing because, like we said, you can have the license, but it's knowing where it's going to end up. Because what a lot of people don't realise is they think, well, that person takes the waste away, so if they go and dump it, it's their problem, not the residents. But actually, if they've given it to somebody who then goes and dumps it down the road, it does become their issue. And comms have been really good and done some quite good Facebook campaigns on that in the past, and I think we'll continue to do that and target certain areas.
But the waste transfer note itself would be the thing that we would target. As you say, the carrier license is fairly simple, and there's still some dodgy carriers out there. But presumably, if we're asking people to ask for the waste transfer note on an individual shipment or waste transfer.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Mahaffey. If Councillor Mackay would like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Rhys, for the presentation. It's an important subject to hear about. I'm just interested to understand what evidence there is as to how effective CCTV is expected to be, especially that you've highlighted the importance of public engagement and human witnesses to the problem. And the second question is really just to understand a little bit more about the differentiation between what our council and what Hampshire County Council, and how the two strategies, where do they meet? Where's the boundary of between the two councils? Where does the point of responsibility switch from one to the other? Maybe a couple of examples would help me understand that. Thank you.
Who would like to answer?
If Rhys is happy to, I'm happy to come in, but he's happy to.
Yeah, so I was just making sure I got the gist of that question. Down. Yeah, so in respect to the CCTV, I don't have any tangible quantitative data that I could share with you or the committee around what benefit a CCTV system would bring in a different scenario. The report reflects on the use of CCTV, and my thoughts on the matter are that CCTV can be a very useful tool, but it has to be well understood how you want to use that tool to address a particular type of issue, in so much as it can be a very effective deterrent, and it can be effective at capturing evidence of the act and the perpetrators of those acts, but it won't be a remedy for fly tipping in all scenarios, situations, and so on, and all locations, quite critically. We want to change behaviour, and where people see that there is a situation where they may be caught on camera doing something that perhaps they know better that they shouldn't, then the camera deterrent hopefully pushes people in the right direction there. Or if they completely know they shouldn't be doing it in the first place, then the camera deterrent at, for example, bring sites, should be effective there. If it isn't, and people are still minded to deposit the waste, then the footage will be there for us to utilise and take forward in prosecution cases. The balance to be found when we're talking about using CCTV, and you touched on the human witness evidence, is that we find a balance between the merits of investigating offences time and resource in maintaining a CCTV system and trying to obtain evidence of offences that are yet to occur against the time and resources needed to progress cases where witnesses are already offering that evidence. And the last thing we want to do is lose the engagement of the public, which I'm sure we would make every effort to ensure doesn't happen. And we recognise the importance of the buy-in from the public, whether from reporting in the first place to providing that witness testimony, because we won't have CCTV in all situations, or far from it, for all scenarios. So there are constraints around how we should use and how we can be most effective with CCTV, but certainly it has its place as a valuable tool to deter, and where it doesn't deter, to capture the evidence we want in order to further promote changing behaviour and taking those people to task. I hope that answers that question. In respect to the overlap with HCC and ourselves, so as you no doubt aware, the HCC prepared this strategy, or have prepared this strategy, and they've done so in their role as the waste disposal authority, where they coordinate the HWRC sites around the county, and the waste that we deliver to them as the waste collection authority from fly tipping incidents from our respective boroughs and districts. So they certainly have a vested interest in wanting to see and bring down and reduce the extent of fly tipping that's occurring around the county, because of the cost there is to them as an organisation for the disposal. Clearly, there's a cost to us for its collection and removal, but they don't have an enforcement role. They don't have any kind of enforcement influence or responsibility, rather, not influence. They don't have any enforcement responsibility, which is something that the tier 2 authorities, us as districts and boroughs, do have. So I guess the overlap is wanting to ensure that districts and boroughs and the county we're all speaking to each other to share that best practice and promote as many positive outcomes in terms of taking prosecutions and reducing fly tipping as much as can be done through that enforcement and through promotion of educational messages and the like through the various social media platforms.
Councillor McKay.
No, just thank you very much for the response. That's very helpful, and I think a thank you as well to those members of the public who've been brave enough, if that's the right expression, to make reports in the first instance, but to provide testimony as well. I think that's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks. If I could just ask one little question that sort of follows on from Councillor Mackay's question, Rhys, and that is going across borders, geographic borders and things, because I'm sure where there's quite a deliberate fly tipping, people are not necessarily cognizant of where the border lies. I mean, presumably we work collaboratively with our neighbours on this kind of thing.
We would. I don't think we have had those cases or individuals yet where they have popped up in more than one borough, but I know across the other authorities in the Hampshire group, if you like, there have been a number of examples where individuals have been behaving in that way, and those authorities have been able to coordinate in respect to the offences that have been caused by the same individual, but are occurring in different places or have occurred in different places. So yeah, that infrastructure is there.
Okay.
And at the point in time where that happens, then yes, we're in a position to effectively communicate on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move to Councillor Testain.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'm very grateful for all the work you do with the prosecution and trying to help get rid of all the problems we have with fly tipping. And obviously in Popley in particular, we have a horrendous problem. And I wish I could feel that, yes, it's something that's going down. I personally have a sort of a bit of a feeling, and it obviously is anecdotal, that I think people are just so fed up with it that potentially it's not getting reported in as often as it could. I know I go around and report things, and we've got it all over the place, and it's just appalling, particularly around the Abbey Road shops. One of the things that really, I totally agree with prosecution. I totally agree with it being a criminal offence. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But what I'd like to know really is what prevention measures and sort of investigation into the reasons why this happens. Now, obviously, Councillor Mahaffey mentioned earlier about the 3 types. And yes, I agree, there are those that will just do it as just happen to think, oh, it's the bring bank and it's too full up, and they leave their bits and pieces at the side. But I'll talk about particularly Abbey Road shops, which is the one that's both close to where I live and close to a lot of Hearts in Popley, where we get constant piles of mattresses, sofas and beds. And that, I think, ties in very much with the second type of offender, or second, third type of offender, which, and also according to DEFRA, is the main culprits, which are the small van loads of stuff, which tend to imply these are people, and they may even have waste licenses, which apparently I believe are quite easy to get. So I'd be interested to know how that works, how you can track back on a waste license and what power that actually gives in itself. But one of the thoughts I was thinking about this with it, because certainly for us within our area, we're not talking about, the odd little bits and pieces. We are talking about big furniture items that are often left, and it's not necessarily just from residents. What commercial facilities do we have? What are we looking at in order to try and make sure that there is no excuse for this from the people that are doing it, so that we're providing them with enough facilities to get rid of it? Because we obviously always tend to focus on the residents, but there's obviously some reason behind why they will continue to do this. Obviously, some people are just chancers. Yes, I get that. But, there must be some other underlying reasons. So anything that's been done that looks into that and engaging with the people that are more likely to do this to try and prevent them would be really useful to know. Thank you.
Hi. Who'd like to pick that up? Is that Reese?
I'll try.
Thank you.
I'm not entirely sure I'll have the answer, I'm afraid. I think fundamentally it'll comes down to cost, the cost of not having to pay to dispose of something, to people who are depositing van loads is far more profitable than having to pay for something to dispose of, and whilst they trying to account for their profit margin as well. But the sorts of fees that we see people charge or hear that people charge for taking away certain items are very small, and too good to be true, really. And this is where the education piece is really important to residents in terms of being alert to what represents a fair price for removal of waste. Challenging people on whether or not, or querying people on whether or not they have waste carriers license is where the waste is going to go. In terms of what motivates people, I think it is simply about making money. That's my speculation, and trying to make a quick buck. It's probably not the case in all scenarios, but or simple as that in all scenarios. But where it's a commercial enterprise of some description, that will be what drives the behaviour.
Just to follow up, so the point is, if somebody's got a van load of stuff, because they have done, some people, maybe they're even somebody's done a house clearance for somebody as a favour, where are they supposed to take that stuff? Would they, and if they've got a van and they don't have a license to do it, or if they do have a license, how much does it cost them? Because, you know, obviously that's obviously useful information for residents to know, because if they then know how much that person should be passing on a cost to them.
So they'd go to the HWRC, wouldn't they? I think if it's a commercial van, they'd have to pay. If you just hired the van because you're a resident clearing out your house, you wouldn't have to pay. But it's certainly something I can pick up on and take back to comms, because we do all these different Facebook, different communications. Maybe that's one of the things that we need to put out there to say, you know, they should be taking it to a proper waste disposal place, which is the HWRC. If they're commercial, this is how much their permit costs for a year. You can work it out based on that.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Testain, some of the reasons behind it, I mean, I know they're general, but on page 31 of our papers, 2.2, there's a little paragraph which talks about the National Fly Tipping Prevention Group did some research. And you won't be surprised to see that it says, you know, financial gains or savings.
It's absolutely, it's always going to be the case, isn't it?
Yeah, lack of waste disposal facilities or access to them, and laziness and an attitude that it's someone else's responsibility to clear up the waste. Those were the three they came up with. Yeah.
It's just making sure we get the message out that, you know, that says that actually if people do have vans of stuff, then they do have access to places to go to get rid of them.
Yeah, and in Basingstoke, yeah, I mean, absolutely we do. In Basingstoke, we've got the HWRC. We know that, you know, that could get busy, but there is slots there, and have issues with people taking slots and they're not flipping turning up, which is really frustrating. But the slots are much better than they were in lockdown now, and so there are options there. And you've got our bulky waste collection service, which is used, and it's, you know, the cost of that is very reasonable for the items that they take.
So Tom, sorry, you came up, disappeared, moved around my screen. Did you want to add to that?
Well, I think it was kind of picked up really because Hayley mentioned it. I was going to just say, obviously, the HWRC, that was kind of a recent change, relative recently, because it's probably about 3 years ago. I think Hampshire took the decision to open that up and allow commercial waste carriers to deposit waste at household waste recycling centres. So, you know, it's obviously a positive step, isn't it? And provide somewhere locally for those people involved in that sort of activity to lawfully dispose of that waste in the proper way. So, this is the point Hayley mentioned, that that is a local site that people can take, commercial operators can take their waste.
Thank you very much. Is that all right, Councillor Testain? Yeah. Councillor Poland, you popped in and then popped back, so I'm going to put you back to the original place in my list. Councillor Poland, if you wanted to ask your question. You're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm afraid I missed most of the presentation for technical reasons, which I bore you with. But I wish we didn't have to discuss fly tipping, because I find it abhorrent. I suspect most other people do. But could I looked at the DEFRA website, and in 1920 there were 1 million incidents, 2/3 of which related to household waste. And it's a point I think that Councillor Mahaffey made, that some of this stuff is actually relatively small stuff. Is there any analysis ever been done as to whether we can provide, as a borough, a service to take this stuff away? Because people are always saying, well, you know, it costs me money to do it. And some of the comments previously have been saying, well, this is all for financial gain. And if a man arrives in a white van and says, I'll take it away for 20 quid, knowing full well that the cost of that is, you know, significantly more, why can't we as a borough either offer to take it away as a gesture to people, or maybe if you can't do that, I don't know what the costs or implications are, but we spend a lot of money as a borough clearing it up. Why don't we actually spend that money taking it away? That's the point I'd make. And if you can't do that, is there a possibility that certain times you can do an amnesty and pick up some of this stuff for people? Because I get fed up to the back teeth of seeing people dumping black bags and the rest of it in the countryside. End of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can take that. I mean, I don't agree that we should be spending money on what we're using to fly tip, because then there's no deterrent, is there? Because people will you're just allowing, you're not seeing it as a criminal offence, and we shouldn't be playing into their hands in that respect. We're then spending money just so people don't fly tip. And actually people need to stop fly tipping because it's a criminal offence. We've got, as I said just now, you said about have we got a service? We do have a bulky waste service, so people can ring up and they can get their mattresses, fridges, etc., all collected at curbside. We have a weekly collection of bins here. We've got a garden waste service. I know it's suspended at the moment because of issues, but you know, in the height of spring when it's all growing, we have that. So we do have a number of these options, and it's just trying to work to deter people. And I just think putting money into it to give them something else is just so you can go and collect it for them for free. Just can't, when we've got all these options, HWRC, garden waste, bulky waste, we do enough as it is.
Well, I take your point, Councillor, but we're spending the money as a borough anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, but we're trying not to.
All I'm asking is it more cost? I don't know. Is it more cost effective to spend the money that we're spending clearing it up than using that money to, ideally, you're never going to solve the problem. I fully understand and accept that, but to try and curtail some of the problem. And I don't know, you know what, I don't know how much it costs to buy a waste whatnot license, but if it's not that much, and if there is no real follow through or deterrent for these guys, then again, you know, I'll go out and buy a white van or whatever, and off we go. And it just doesn't solve a problem. That's the problem. Problem, if you'll pardon the pun.
I could, yeah, obviously come in. I mean, it's obviously, as you'll have seen in some of the prosecutions we've taken, you know, people being fined thousands of pounds. You know, I think that does send out a really powerful message to people to say, you know, that there isn't an excuse for doing this. And actually, yes, there are very significant potential penalties if people are found to have committed that offence. You know, and obviously that's the strong message that we're sending out. That yeah, you might think you're saving some money by using somebody very cheaply to dispose of your waste, but actually that's yeah, you've got to ask those questions that we touched on earlier about having confidence that that person is reputable, and you've got confidence that the waste is actually going to go to the appropriate sort of disposal facility. So, you know, again, we're trying to send out the right messages to people that there are appropriate ways to discard of their waste, and obviously in terms of the consequences, if they are just discarding it by fly tipping, then you know, I think the sort of fines that we're seeing speak for themselves.
And the fines are significant. Tom, when we prosecute people, are there costs to the council in doing that? So are we left with residual costs?
Reece probably knows the details more on this because I know he's done a little bit of analysis, but yeah, generally speaking, yes. Yeah, we obviously seek to recover our costs, both in terms of collection and legal costs in terms of taking cases. So we always seek to recover that where we can. And generally speaking, I think we are successful in getting those costs as well.
Okay. Reece, do you know, do we usually get our costs back?
It depends on the court very often, on what they're prepared to award us. Sometimes we get full costs, sometimes we get half. For the times we don't get any. But you know, hopefully, you know, even in those cases where we don't get any costs, the benefit of being able to publicise a criminal conviction dissuades, you know, X number of potential offenders, and you know what we realise a cost, and in terms of changed behaviour from potential or would-be offenders.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wooldridge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Poland. I completely agree with what you've just said, and you know, and the analysis that you had there. Thank you. I was going to ask a similar question, but I'll tweak it a little bit. I was going to ask about these costs in the section on costs. I think it was, I can't remember, but you say how much we've recovered, how much, you know, the costs have been awarded, how much we've recovered, but there is no figure there about how much this has actually cost our legal team and the resources to take these people to court. I do completely agree with the prosecution route as a tool, but I guess my question is more about are there other sort of ways that we can do it as well? And I was thinking more of like I don't know if any council does it. Is there a restorative sort of justice approach to this? Like instead of like a family who might have done it just because slightly out of ignorance, putting a bring bank side without sort of really understanding what they were doing, when you, instead of going gung-ho and prosecuting that individual, well, they really haven't got the money to pay the cost. Have you thought about using that person and maybe using them with the education and the PR, and maybe in the same way that we have, you know, this probation service going out and helping us in the community payback? Is there a scheme that we, or something we could set up to use these people and say, well, we won't take you to court, you won't end up having to be prosecuted, but we want you to use you in a way that we can, you know, sort of really promote this as a defence, almost like educating them and asking them, giving the option to do that. I'm just an idea, but I just think, you know, we need, you know, the gung-ho approach of convicting and prosecuting everybody regardless of their situation, to me seems a bit too much black and white, really, and I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that. So that's what I wanted to know. And I had another question on partnership working as well, you know, because often it'll be, you know, if in certain areas they'll flight it, certain people will flight it sometimes on council land, sometimes on housing association land or other landowners' land. What work are we doing collaboratively to work with other agencies? So we may be doing joint prosecutions or joint work to stop these individuals from fly tipping. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Who would like to pick this up?
I can begin.
Thank you.
So in respect to the actions that we would take and the merits of those actions, there's always a public interest test that we have to satisfy, and as well as an evidential test, in order to take criminal proceedings against anyone. So you know, the circumstances around the incident and how that came to be will be part of that public interest test. But in those cases where we've taken those prosecutions, you know, firstly our legal team, and then obviously secondly the court have agreed that, you know, it has been in the public interest to take that criminal matter before the court. We have the option of issuing fixed penalty notices to persons in situations where the offence, if you like, is more minor in nature. But the volume of prosecution work the volume of work we've had in the last few years has really necessitated that we've focused on prosecution action. I think there have been three fixed penalty notices that we've issued in that time to different parties for less significant indiscretions. There aren't any other mechanisms available to us in terms of how we might discharge any offences with individuals, such as the restorative justice kind of measures that you describe. Yeah, the options are fairly confined in terms of where we could take such matters. The second question, in respect of was it housing associations in particular? Or,
or it could be other landowners, private landowners. Yeah.
Yeah. So many of the prosecutions we have taken have related to incidents that have occurred on private land. We're not selective about where those incidents occur, and we will engage with the private landowner on those occasions where the waste has been deposited on their land, and if we are successful in prosecution in those cases, we have been able to recover costs from the outcome of the prosecution that the landowner incurred in removing the waste. So effectively a compensation or clearance costs were awarded in return. Landowners have been very cooperative with us where we've taken action, and where they know there's a prospect that they'll get costs returned to them. They are, as probably no surprise, more happy to try and assist us with our inquiries and actions.
Thank you very much, Rhys. Councillor Wooldridge, is that sufficient answer for you?
Yeah, it's sufficient in answering the question. I mean, I would be interested, I don't know about other councillors, to know what the costs are, the legal costs are of all of this, and just to see how much we are spending all of this, as Councillor Poland asked for earlier. So I don't know, you haven't got that now, obviously, but to distribute that around after the meeting would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Woodridge. I've noted that.
Thank you.
Could I add just one?
Yes, sorry, Tom.
One extra piece of that. Obviously, so when it comes to sentencing, obviously, just picking up on the point that Councillor Aldridge was making about individuals that may be on very low incomes, etc. Obviously, that's the decision of the court. They obviously take that into account when they come to deciding what the sanction would be. And there certainly have been at least one, possibly more than that, in terms of cases where we have had community sort of sanction imposed, a community service. I can't remember what it was now, 80 hours or something like that. Seems to ring a bell. But again, so it's just down to the court, isn't it, to use their discretion based on that individual circumstances.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Okay, if we could move to Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Reece, Tom, and Councillor H's. It was very helpful. But my frustrations, we are in a situation as a waste collection authority, and having Hampshire County Council as a disposal authority. Their strategy itself says on our page 31, like Jenny mentioned earlier, the lack of disposal facility is one of the major factors. But I cannot see any evidence of us sort of taking this back to Hampshire County Council or have some sort of a strategic view to make sure that we increase that capacity at some point. So that's one of the joint working that I probably would have expected or demonstrated in the paper. That's one joint working that I have an issue with. The second joint working issue that I have is, like Councillor Woodridge mentioned, the working with different landowners where my ward borders with Populi, we've have serious concerns around fly tipping. Were reported around the land owned by developer or managed by developer. Then it was moved to the council-owned roads. So this is something that we need to demonstrate on how we're going to tackle it in a long run. That's the second piece of joint working that's missing on the paper. The third bit is Reece just mentioned that you haven't got any sort of an evidence of fly tipping from various other authorities, but just because we don't have the evidence of the fly tipping from other authorities, I can guarantee, or most of my residents can guarantee, most of the fly tipping reported on the edges of Tatley or the Sherborne St John's were coming from either the A339 on Newbury or Reading. So we still have to make that engagement work, and it would have been really useful to have some sort of an evidence of these three sort of joint working demonstrated on the report. If you have any thoughts around, I know you touched based on the land ownership, that's great, but I think we probably need a bit more around the strategic view on the increasing the capacity, which was clearly demonstrated on the Hampshire County Council's waste strategy as a second, the principal reason or key reason for the fly tipping. And the other, I'm a strong believer and would rather have sort of a prevent than sort of a prosecuting. And it clearly says the prevention measures are not working in many instances, according to Hampshire's the strategy. Any thoughts on that, or is there any possibility that we can demonstrate that in our future work?
Thank you, Councillor Ganesh. Quite a lot in there. Who would like to start on that one? Oh, everybody's moving around.
Yeah, I'm happy to start.
Oh, Tom, thank you.
So I'm just trying to recall the exact date, but there certainly there's an open letter from the leader, Councillor Rattigan to Hampshire County Council, obviously highlighting that, as a growing borough, there is a significant demand on the HWRC in the borough. And obviously the issues that we've had in terms of the use of the household waste recycling centres, for example, in Newbury, etc. But very much, putting pressure on as we can, petitioning Hampshire to look at providing increased facilities in the borough. So I'm more than happy to try and find that letter, because it wasn't that long ago. I think it was in the last 18 months. I think that was sent out, so I can get that sort of circulated again to members of CEP. So it obviously demonstrates that the administration is aware of the if you like, the need for increased provision in the borough, particularly as the population grows. So that was just to respond to that point, to say obviously we are making those requests of Hampshire to look at that. The other point, we'll go back. I think it touches on the point you're making in terms of just the approach to enforcement. Obviously, we do an awful lot of education, the CSPO team, particularly when they're out on patrol and they may encounter, a bag of waste left by somebody's gate, for example. They'll go and speak to residents and just, informally sort of deal with those sorts of situations. So, it's not that we always look to prosecute for every single issue, if you like. We obviously try and educate residents in those sorts of circumstances. So just to mention that other sort of strand of work that we do. Is there any other points I've not picked up on that perhaps Rhys wants to answer? Yeah,
to Councillor Ganesh, if I've got the wrong end of the stick here, then please forgive me and feel free to jump in where if I'm on the wrong path. I think your point was around whether we'd worked with partners and agencies outside of Basingstoke and Deane, and the point I was trying to make earlier was that not that we don't think that people who are fly tipping in Basingstoke and Deane are not fly tipping elsewhere. It's just that those cases haven't yet come across our workflow, if you like. We haven't dealt with any cases where there has been that overlap between somebody who's transgressing here in Basingstoke and then perhaps somebody transgressing in Test Valley, Rushmore, Hart, or wherever it might be. That those cases haven't materialised yet. I would fully expect that kind of thing to be happening. It's just that the evidence, those types of cases haven't materialised as yet. In terms of how we're working with agencies on a sort of cross-boundary level, the initiative with VOSA recently, Hampshire County Council, and the Hampshire Constabulary, I think is a good example of the work that's coming through from and that we're able to facilitate not facilitate, sorry, but to coordinate through the Hampshire's group that we're part of. And I think the similar initiatives will take part in different parts of the county at different times. But to capture those people who are driving through, who knows where they may have come from. When we stop somebody on the A339, there's any number of places, or the A30, any number of places they could have originated. But having that that collaborative approach on that day with the police and VOSA as the vehicle agency, is a good example of one initiative that we have been able to be part of. Forgive me, but I'm not sure, I can't quite remember if there was another element to.
No, I think, Rhys, between you and Tom, you've covered the three.
You have, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Is that okay, Councillor Ganesh?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rhys. I think you pretty much covered all three sort of key areas that I've raised. Thank you. I hope that translates into some sort of outcome for coming months or years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm mindful that Councillor Mahaffey and Councillor Testone have asked a question already, so I'm going to leapfrog and come back. I'm going to ask Councillor Compton-Burnett if she'd like to ask her question.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the report and for your very helpful answers. I just wanted to build on something that Councillor Poland and also Councillor Ganesh have talked about, which is focusing on prevention, but also take a slightly different approach and maybe giving people an amnesty. I'm thinking particularly of the problem in Abbey Road, and whether maybe advertising that there's going to be a massive skip or few skips in Abbey Road, first weekend of March, chuck all your stuff in there, and then they take it away and we'll do the same thing first weekend in July, and just have a look and see whether that has an effect. Because, you know, as Councillor Poland said, there's a very good chance that we'll save a lot of money by doing that if people actually use that facility whilst it's there.
Thank you. Who'd like to pick that one up as a suggestion? Sounds quite interesting.
I can certainly I was thinking about this one myself actually very recently in terms of actually what's our experience been elsewhere. So when we had the floods at Buckskin, we obviously put in place skips to allow residents to discard household items that had obviously been damaged in the flooding, and unfortunately those skips were just misused. Not exclusively, but you were finding that a lot of commercial waste operators were filling them with waste, etc., etc. So it's very difficult to protect those sorts of issues, and it's obviously going to be a very costly enterprise to enter into. And I just reflect on the experience we had before, that if you provide them, it doesn't mean that the residents living locally are going to be the ones that benefit from that.
I just add to what Tom is saying there. I think in the age of social media that we are, the word that there is a very large roll-on, roll-off skip available at a location, for example, would very much spread like wildfire, and the opportunists as well as the well-intentioned would inundate it essentially. And I recall the example that Tom refers to in Buckskin. 7 years ago now, well, more than that. And I know from a colleague, and I don't have personal experience of this, but we have, and housing associations have offered this facility or this amnesty in the past, that it hasn't been it's been inundated beyond what the capacity of the skips has been, and beyond the goodwill gesture and the amnesty that it was intended to be, and misused. So we don't have a positive experience, I guess, from those occasions where something similar has been tried in the past.
I'll just add on, obviously the Abbey Road sort of situation has been referred to. And so what I'll do is obviously I'll bring that back to the CSPO team. As we've mentioned, they're doing a campaign next month all about sort of fly tipping and trying to get the messages across the public about how we deal with it. So I'll certainly speak to the CSPO team and see if we can do some sort of targeted work in that particular location, and obviously contact you as well, Councillor Tustin, just to get your insight into that.
Prevention has been a big part of that, the discussion around that campaign. So we're very cognizant of that.
Thank you. Councillor Compton-Bennett, did you want to come back?
Just very, very quickly. I'm just wondering whether there could be a way in which it were manned. So you just had it there for maybe a Saturday. People had to show proof that they lived in Popley. I just think it might be worth giving it a try, just thinking through how can we stop it from being abused, and just giving people the chance, if they find it very, very difficult to pay for that sort of facility and they've got stuff hanging around, it's been there forever, let's just try and help.
But you're not going to be able to distinguish between the people that can't pay for a facility and those that can. People will just turn up, and then trying to man it, look at council tax bills. We have a weekly waste service, bulky waste collection, which is more than reasonably paid. We've got an HWRC, if you live there, which isn't that far away, which has loads of slots. I agree with what the officers say, and I just don't think it's something that's worked. We've got to deter fly tippers and just push all those other services which we do have here. We've got all of that, and I just think giving them this option is just saying it will, as Tom said, it will just end up being totally abused, I'm afraid. I think what Tom's saying about using the CPSOs to promote all of how you deter fly tipping and promoting the bulky waste and things is a lot better use of our resources, and working with the housing associations in that respect.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we could move to, if I could make these short, please, because I'm mindful of the time. It's 20:08, so we spent quite a lot of time on this item. How it's really interesting and very rich in conversation, but just mindful of our evening. So, Councillor Mahaffey.
Thanks, Chair. There's two things I would like to see, and just to save time, I don't expect an answer on these, and they're both targeting the classification 3, the man in a van type tipper, who are my pet hate. West Mercia Police do a tyre tagging scheme. That's specifically for tyre changing firms because they're being targeted by unscrupulous waste shippers who are taking the tyres and dumping them on the side of the road. I've thought about this long and hard, and Hayley, I've sent you something on this. I would like to see us encourage through our communications residents label their waste as it goes away, because given the scenario we've described of a house clearance or something like that, if you in good faith hire a man with a van to take it away, yes, you are legally responsible for it, but the reality is you've hired somebody to take it away. If we can encourage residents to discreetly put a telephone number somewhere inside there, then I would like to see that. If we find it on the road, we phone them up, they can explain the situation, and I would like to see us give them a moratorium against their prosecution. We can actually prosecute the man with the van. That's the first thing I'd like to see. The other thing that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there are other apps out there, is the scenario that I find very often around here. You're driving around the countryside, you see some rubbish. I always go and report it. I always go on the council website and register it. But it does take a bit of an effort, because if you're on your way out, you've got to remember it. You've then got to go back, log on. The kids are shouting, partner wants supper, all that sort of thing. It takes an effort to do that. There is a company out there called the Kingdom Services Group, and I'm not promoting this. I'm sure there are other apps. They do an app called the Clear Waste app, and essentially it's a mechanism for you pressing a button, and obviously because they're on smartphones, it immediately reports your location and that you are reporting some waste having been tipped. I think that would be a very useful thing, particularly out in the countryside.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure that needs a response. Does anybody want to say anything, or just note Councillor Mahaffey's suggestion?
Noted.
Yeah, thank you. I will agree with you, Councillor Mahaffey. When I report fly tipping, it's usually somewhere which doesn't appear to be on any map, and being able to put the geographic point is actually really, really difficult. So that's a good suggestion. Councillor Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick as well. I'm delighted to hear more councillors here also talking about the idea of prevention and coming up with solutions that we certainly have been discussing within our Labour group around the ideas of amnesties, and also considering people on low incomes and all the rest of it. Yes, I know we do have a lot of services, but they're not always accessible. Bulky waste can be quite costly if you're on a very low income. Not everyone has a car or access to a car to get to the waste recycling centre. That's another problem. Going back to the question at the point that both Councillor Wooldridge and Councillor Poland have talked about with the costs, what I'd really like to know is how much fly tipping as a whole costs us, never mind the fact that we recover our costs through the few prosecutions we have. How much is it costing us as a whole, and how can that be reviewed as to the cost of doing amnesties and doing ways of more prevention, so more carrot rather than stick, and seeing if we can make it balance that way around, because I think that could potentially, it's worth looking at. I think we can't just dismiss it and say we've just got to keep punishing everybody. We need to look at ways of stopping it happening to start with, and if we can save money that way, then obviously it's got to be looked at. Thank you.
Is that data that we can access, Bruce or Tom?
Yeah, I can come in on that. So we don't have Basingstoke specific data that we compile and calculate ourselves. That there's no standard way to do that would allow a meaningful comparison or assessment of what we're spending against, for example, what another authority might be spending. There are so many cogs involved in the sort of fly tipping process, if you like. It's too varied and too fragmented to be able to quantify into a usefully measurable figure. From the data that we submit to DEFRA in terms of the number of incidents and the size and type of incidents that the operations, the street cleansing crews collect. When the street cleansing crews collect waste, in addition to the number of incidents that they're collecting, they're also recording the size of that fly tip and the location of that fly tip. And in respect of the size and number of a fly tip, DEFRA apply a formula, and they apply that same formula to all the data that all other local authorities in the UK submit to them, and that allows DEFRA to produce an aggregate figure for what fly tipping costs nationally, and in theory, what it allows each local authority to see what the costs of fly tipping was in their respective areas. But that is a very rudimentary figure based on a figure of DEFRA's own figures of DEFRA's own composing against the number of incidents and type of actions there have been. So yeah, it's not exactly the figure that Councillor Tustain is requesting or asking for.
Is it possible, Rhys, to have the figures of what we spend as a council, not necessarily in comparison to other councils, but is it possible for us to quantify how much it costs us to deal with fly tipping?
We've looked at this a number of times in the past. Like I can see Tom's got his hand up as well.
Yeah. Sorry.
In a second. No, that's
okay.
Fine. And we've looked at this a number of times in the past, and the simple answer is it's not possible to come up with a reliable figure.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, did you want to add? Tom, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, just to sort of come back on the issues raised previously. So yeah, I think my personal view around this is it's quite dangerous to sort of go back to a position of saying, you know what, this is actually the council's responsibility to resolve this in a way that's free to residents, and we'll drop a skip off in the front of your house, and actually it's no problem. Clearly it's the responsibility of the householder to dispose of their waste in an appropriate way. And actually what we facilitate through the bulky waste collection service is an incredibly, the charges that we currently charge at Basingstoke are very, very low compared to a lot of areas. And so for those that are on a means tested benefit or concessionary rate, it's £17 for up to 3 items, which is incredibly cheap, really. And it shouldn't be a factor in terms of how you can discard some of that larger items of waste. And we obviously talked about HWRC, which is obviously free, and again, the availability of slots has become much, much better recently. So again, there are means there for residents to dispose of their waste in an appropriate way. Just so I come like that.
Okay, Councillor Tustain, I'm not sure we've answered your question, but we've tried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Last question from Councillor Wooldridge.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a response of this, but I just want to throw my weight into this idea of amnesty raised by other councillors tonight, and I've mentioned earlier. I do think you could overcome the issues of manning it and of checking whether the residents are local. You could do it by pre-registration, just have somebody there just checking the reservation or whatever. Or it's not, I wouldn't say it's the same as the Buckskins floods. My understanding is those skips were left unmanned, so people could come and do them at any time. But if it's literally a limited period on a Saturday morning for local residents who book in advance, I don't see why, as a pilot, we can't try that just to see if it works. Why not? It's the role of us on this committee to put forward our views, and that's what we're all doing. And I think there's several of us tonight have put forward that view, and I can't see why that can't be tried and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wooldridge. Anyone want to respond or happy to note comment? Happy to note that comment. Okay, so thank you very much indeed. It's been a very interesting debate. I think the paper supported a very informative debate. I think there was one question that is outstanding to catch up later, which is about the legal costs we incur for prosecuting. If there's any data that we could be shared around the committee after the meeting, that would be very helpful. I think there's the committee welcomes the work that's being done around communication, because that does seem to be quite a key issue in the prevention of fly tipping. However, there were suggestions from lots of councillors about how we might be able to support not just prevention, but support residents who may be finding it quite difficult to use the facilities that we do offer, which, you know, there are a lot of them, absolutely accept that. But I also hear councillors who are saying that for some people, it's still difficult for them to access. And there was discussion about this potential amnesty. And I think, yes, the CSPO team are going to do some targeted work, and Abbey Road was one of the places that they will be asked to target. Councillor Ganesh, was there something you wanted to add before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. Can we get some sort of an update at some point on the letter written by the leader to Hampshire County Council for increasing the capacity or an additional facility where that can be accessible for the borough residents? Thank you.
So do we know if there's been a response to that letter?
It's just ongoing discussions around waste HWRCs as a whole in the county, and I know that Hampshire are looking at that as part of budgets and ongoing projects, and as, you know, part of the waste as a whole. So as we know more, then obviously we will feed back to members, but we're always pushing for further HWRC availability in Basingstoke and Deane and further over towards the other end of the Basingstoke and Deane, because of the issues that we've had in the past with permits over in West Berks and things. So it is an ongoing matter, and once we have any news, we'll let you know. But it is obviously relying on Hampshire.
I think also there's a bit of a waiting for the implications of the Environment Act and various things as well, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all huge. And as you know, as that moves on, then we will absolutely be coming to CP later in the year around recycling as a whole and the work we're doing with Hampshire on that. So the HWRC will probably feed into that in parallel. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed, Councillor Eaches and Tom and Rhys, for your input this evening. It's been extremely good. Thank you very much. So if the committee is happy to, well, actually it's 8:30. We do have the Leisure Park Aquadrome and the work programme to discuss. So I just wanted to check whether members are happy to push on or whether they would like a 5-minute comfort break. I've got a thumbs up to push on. Is everybody happy to push on? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So the next item, item 7, is the Leisure Park and Aquadrome Engagement Strategy. And we welcome Councillor John Isaac, who's the Cabinet Member for Finance and Major Projects, and Kate Dean, who's the Project Director for Basingview and Commercial. Before we ask them to speak, I would like to invite Mr. Beavers, if he would like to address the committee. Good evening, Mr. Beavers.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, thank you very much. We can.
Okay. I have correspondence going back 8 years arguing for Saunders Field to become a nature reserve. 5 years ago, I authored a vision for Saunders Field. The report to committee omits any mention of the critical state of biodiversity or Saunders Field, let alone as a nature reserve and educational centre. That omission speaks volumes about how council thinks. How many more years have to pass before there is action? How many more growing children abandoned? How much more wildlife lost? When is this council going to provide children with some of the knowledge and tools they need to counter the mess our generation has made for them? Making the restoration of Saunders Field a servile dependency of a complex commercial development was always questionable, not least because of the inevitable timescales and likely delays. Now it should be unacceptable, but that is your direction of travel again. Play areas and town centre parks receive hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds of new and replacement investment for hard infrastructure and ongoing maintenance, but little for biodiversity or its education. By comparison, Saunders Field, important wetland habitat at the head of a chalk river in an older part of the town, increasingly remote from the countryside, remains abandoned. Saunders Field is far more important to the future of children than yet more play parks and high-cost leisure, but thinking remains blinkered and starved of foresight and commitment. How many more years must be wasted before children are equipped to deal with the appalling lack of judgment and lack of action over decades that has led to a climate change and biodiversity disaster? The dependency between the leisure park and Saunders Field should be broken. We appeal to councillors on all sides to challenge the portfolio holders to act now to restore Saunders Field as a nature reserve and place of learning. Children and schools are critical stakeholders here, not operators and landlords. Finally, has the council considered inviting the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust or a conservation consortium to tender for the restoration of Saunders Field? The community benefits from that approach might far exceed any from a corporate developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. Do we have any comments or questions for Mr. Beavers? We're just happy to note what he has said. We're happy to note. Thank you very much, Mr. Beavers. I'll also welcome Councillor Bean, the portfolio holder for Health, Wellbeing and Leisure. Sorry, Councillor Bean, I didn't immediately see you there. Councillor Isaac, did you want to say an introduction for this paper?
Yes, I'd like to. Good evening, Councillor Vaux, and good evening, councillors. And I'm speaking as a sort of joint responsibility for the leisure park and the aquadrome with Councillor Rebecca Bean. Can I just first of all respond to Mr. Beavers?
Certainly. Because
he's raised an important issue there. He says that we're admitting considering Saunders Field for use as potentially use as a nature reserve. But actually what we're talking about tonight is an engagement plan. So I think he's being rather unfair in attacking us. We're not looking at the detailed proposals tonight for what we might wish to do on the leisure park. I think there's probably very good grounds for exploring the use of Saunders Field as a wetlands, as a nature reserve for educational purposes. And I think one of the officers has been in contact with Mr. Beavers over the last few days, and we would welcome his contribution to the work that we have before us in relation to the leisure park. So
thank you.
I hope that reassures everyone, and including Mr. Beavers. So, as you said, Chairman, we are asking for your comments on the engagement plan on our journey to bringing forward a new master plan for the leisure park, for the regeneration of the leisure park. As you know, the leisure park and the aquadrome is one of the borough's best used, most popular leisure attractions. And following the disappointment of the withdrawal of New River, it's important that we, as we start again, that we hear from a wide cross-section of people in the borough. We want to hear what they'd like to see with a new version of a master plan for the leisure park, and what they don't want to hear. So we put together, I think, a very strong, high caliber team of experts to advise us. And we now want to move at pace in hearing people's views so that we can come forward with the new master plan. I think we'd be very happy to be invited back to CEP over the ensuing months to update you. But you have before you the programme, which really does represent a cracking pace for this for the next 6 months. But I think I understand that after having spent so long working with New River, and we have to start again. But as I said, it's important that we have a wide cross-section of views. I would like to suggest, Chairman, that Kate Dean, who's the sort of project lead on this, officer-wise, might like to just talk to the engagement plan, and I'll hand over to her if I may.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Isaac. So, Kate, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just to talk you through the paper. So we appointed consultants at the end of last year, and the two main consultants that are working on the engagement piece of work are BDP, who are developing up the master plan, and we have a company called Camargue, who are dealing with development of the strategy around the proposed facility mix in the aquadrome itself. So this first piece of engagement is really running through to a programme at the end of April. I'm pleased to let you know that we are on programme as it stands. So BDP have already started engagement with the investors, the operators. They're starting to speak to some of the user groups, and they'll work over the next few weeks to speak to elected members, ward members, and then we get to the main event in this stage of the engagement, which is in February. We're targeting the week commencing the 14th of February to run 2 webinars, and they will be promoted widely for sort of residents to join those sessions with BDP. At the same time, we'll open an online survey, and that will run through to the start of the pre-election period at the end of March. So in terms of the objectives of this strategy, it's to be open and clear, to engage comprehensively and extensively, and to use locations and platforms that are widely accessible. The paper details all of the proposed stakeholders and audiences for this piece of engagement, but if you feel as if there are groups that we haven't identified, please let me know, and we can make sure that BDP and Camargue can pick up those particular groups. So that's all I wanted to say, Chair, but happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you very much, Kate. So just a reminder to the committee that we are being asked to consider the engagement strategy proposed for the development of the master plan for the leisure park and the future aquadrome facility mix. So do I have any questions? Councillor Testain.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate, and Councillor Isaac for this. Actually, this is very exciting stuff, isn't it? And it's nice to be engaging on this particular topic. One of the things I noticed in the paper, it talks about the social media engagement, and it does say including, so this could quite simply be that you haven't listed everything, but I noticed things like there's no Oak Ridge or Popley groups included, obviously, as that's close to my heart. And I wondered whether that was just purely because it was a bit tedious to list everything out. So there's that one. And another point is, I'd be interested to know if you're planning on doing any sort of public presentation. So, for example, something in the malls or the Discovery Centre, which will be up for a while, so that people have an opportunity to go and look at plans and things at an appropriate moment, rather than relying on paper surveys or online surveys, which as we know, tend to fall by the wayside and unfortunately don't get quite the audience or response that we would really like.
Thank you. Kate, would you like to respond?
Yes, certainly. Perfectly good. Happy to sort of add that specific group, Councillor Tustain. It wasn't intended to be a sort of particular omission. It's just that it's a short paper, and we wanted to sort of allude to the fact that we will engage as extensively as we possibly can. So I'll make sure that we pick up that particular group that you've identified. In terms of your second question, yes, the intention is to do some public display boards. We had hoped that we would be able to do more of a sort of drop-in engagement centre, but we've just sort of struggled with COVID restrictions. But if they start to lift, yeah, certainly that's something that we will build into the programme going forward. This is just the first stage of what will inevitably be a lengthy engagement process as the plans for the leisure park develop. What the intention is to do with this phase is to put some boards, hopefully in one of the vacant units in the Malls, and to do the same in the Aquadrome.
That's excellent here. Just to clarify on the groups, I only mention things like Oak Ridge and Popley because obviously that's my area, but obviously the leisure centre is something that the whole of the borough use. So making sure that all areas are covered at that level of detail, I think, is obviously vital, which I'm sure you know, I don't need to tell you that, but just to be clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tustain. Councillor Wooldridge.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a quickie, really. I appreciate that the report was written at times of COVID, and you know, didn't know where we were heading with all of this. So, but and maybe this is why this hasn't been included. But I wondered whether, given that young people are our future and they're the ones that they're going to be using these leisure facilities more than anyone, schools and colleges don't specifically seem to be mentioned in this, and I think there will be a really big role for schools and colleges in terms of using them to help consult with us on what our young people want, because they're going to be the users of this primarily. So just your thoughts on that, and whether you could, like Jackie said, you know, you did say including but not list everybody, and it may be just that you are thinking of them but haven't detailed them in the report. But that was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to pick that one up. Yes, we will do that. We've done that as part of the town centre strategy development. So we went to see the students at BCOT. I did a presentation to the students at QMC just before Christmas on all of the major projects. That was particularly to their sixth form geography students, but there is a good line of communication with the principal at QMC and a sort of standing invitation and sort of understanding to continue to engage with their students on town centre, and we'll do it with the leisure park too.
Thank you, Kate. Is that okay, Councillor Wooldridge? Yeah, I mean, I just on the 648, there are lots and lots of Facebook groups across the borough. Kate, I mean, would you like borough councillors to let you know where all these Facebook groups are?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because, you know, I know in Chinham there are 2 or 3 closed groups that I know would participate, for example.
That would be welcome, thank you.
So perhaps if we could put an email out to all councillors to be able to provide that information, would that be helpful? Not just this committee?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Compton-Bennett.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, is the golf centre part of this consultation exercise?
No, it isn't. So we have drawn effectively a red line which includes the core leisure park, Saunders Field, and there is a portion of land which is, I'm afraid, not very snappily named, but it's the site to the northeast of Thornycroft roundabout that we've also asked BDP to look at, but not the golf course.
Given that the whole area works really well together, and obviously the golf course is a leisure facility, what is the reason for it not being included, and could that change?
We understand from the LPA that through their leisure needs assessment that is a successful and sort of vibrant community facility. What BDP are looking at is connectivity to and from and through the leisure park and those adjoining uses. So we are looking at it from a sort of connectivity perspective, but it's not being looked at from a redevelopment perspective.
Thank you. And just two other very quick things. First of all, I would echo what other councillors have said about face-to-face. I think that would be great if we could do as much face-to-face as possible. The other question is, could you please include health services and voluntary sectors more? There's an awful lot of really good work that's going on with rehabilitation and also obesity strategy, that sort of thing. Yes. And I know BD Leisure is very keen to build on that work. Thank you.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Mahaffey.
Thanks, Chair. I mentioned this last night at group, and obviously not everybody was at our group meeting. I've been involved with Basingstoke Bluefins for a number of years now. Basingstoke Bluefins is one of the biggest swim clubs in the county, and they've changed considerably in the last couple of years, insofar as the management team now are all of them national gold medal winners or European gold medal winners, and there is a potential now for making the Aquadrome a centre of excellence where we could have elite level competitions. We'll never get an Olympic pool, which is what people have been talking about, because we have a national Olympic centre already, but we could host elite level competitions there. So there's two things that I'd like you to, or like everyone to think about, please. One is there's a discussion between a 50-metre pool. You don't necessarily need a 50-metre pool, but you can have a 10-lane pool. There's all sorts of different variations. But the problem is, at the moment, is Swim England will not support a 50-metre pool. Why? I have no idea. But I'd very much like to see the council or the cabinet or Councillor Bean yourself engaging with Swim England to find out why and to encourage them down the road of a 50-metre pool, elite pool, whatever we want to call it. The second thing is there is considerable, we've only thus far been talking about the Aquadrome as a single unit. There is a considerable difference between elite level competition swimming and what Serco manage, which is the flumes and the family stuff. Both of them are equally important. Obviously, elite level swimming is important to swimmers and sports, and the family side of the flumes is great. But there's an awful lot of conflict between allocation of pool hours. So what I'd like us to start thinking about is how we can separate those two, if we do want an elite level facility there, how we can separate the management so that Serco manage the leisure facility and Bluefins have expressed to me an interest in being involved in the management of an elite pool. If we could pursue that, I'd be delighted.
Thank you, Councillor. Did anybody want to make a comment, or just going to note that?
Yeah, so I think obviously the purpose of the paper this evening is in terms of that engagement strategy. So I note your points. What I would say in terms of the Aquadrome is that whatever comes forward has to be viable. So I think I would just kind of caution that at this point, and the implications of an Olympic or elite swimming pool are quite different from, a 25-metre pool. But I think there are definitely options that we can explore and look at. So from an engagement perspective, we're clear that they, as a user group, that they're a significant part of, the Aquadrome as it is at the moment. So I think the commitment that we can make at the moment is that that dialogue will take place. We will engage with them, but you know what a future aquadrome will look like, you know, we're not there yet. But I think what I would caution at this early point is that whatever does come forward has to be viable.
Yeah, no, clearly. Like as I say, though, from an engagement perspective, the only thing I'm looking for is that we include Swim England in whatever conversations we're having, because they are a very important stakeholder, and at the moment they're being a bit of a blocker, as far as I can understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a couple of comments from myself. I see your hand's just gone up, Councillor Poland. I'll just ask this couple of questions myself. I assume that the ice rink user group will be one of the groups that we will be including in the strategy. And I just wondered if you had any comments, Kate, on the interface between this engagement strategy and the town centre strategy regarding leisure. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Certainly the ice users will be included in that user group. In terms of the interface between this strategy and the town centre strategy, the town centre strategy is a little ahead, and one of the things that flagged up was the potential or even need for more town centre leisure. And what we're seeing is that there is an emerging trend in the new and emerging leisure concepts for them to be smaller format and therefore sort of probably more suitable to town centre locations. So we are very mindful of getting leisure in the right location, whether it's large or small format.
Thank you very much, Kate. That's useful to know. Councillor Poland.
Chair, thank you very much. The decision to obviously widely involve many people is very sensible and will deflect hopefully some of the, I would suspect, unjustified criticism that's levelled at what has or has not happened in the past. But insofar as the communications, and although the parish councils may be some way away from the intended facilities, is it the intention that you would advise the parish councils and or seek their views on what is proposed to be going on?
Yes, we will do that, and also sort of encourage all residents to take part in that online survey or sign up for the webinars.
Okay. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Kate and Councillor Bean, Councillor Isaac, for attending. I think that was a very useful discussion. The engagement strategy does look very comprehensive, and it's going to be a very busy time for the next couple of months, and we wish you the best of luck with that. I think just one particular action was around engagement with councillors for the promotion of opportunities to engage with the strategy regarding local leaflets and local Facebook groups. I think that was an action. But that was really useful. Thank you very much for bringing it back. Councillor Isaac, you mentioned that you would keep CEP up to date with progress. Do you have any particular timeline in mind?
I'll defer to Kate on that, if I may.
Okay. Kate, you've been put in.
Well, the intention is to run the public engagement through to the start of the sort of pre-election period. So I would suggest that it's post the elections, once we've had a chance to get all of that feedback, assimilate it and feedback at that point.
So do you think June is a realistic date, or do you think it might not get to June?
No, I think June would be fine, Chair.
June. Okay, so
yes.
We could pencil in the possibility of this coming back in June. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you, committee. So we will move to item 8, which is the work programme and the task and finish groups. So we have here for the March meeting, we have a verbal update on climate change. We have the cultural strategy, which was delayed from this meeting. And it is our intention to invite the Anvil Trust to present to the committee prior to the cultural strategy item on the agenda, for two reasons, really. I mean, because they're an important part of the culture offering in the town, but also because they are significant recipients of grant funding from the council, so therefore a strategic partner, and again, so a double interest, I think, for the committee. So I'm hoping that they will be able to attend as well. The CCG, as you know, we're going to attend this meeting to talk about out of hospital care, but with the current situation regarding Omicron and various, they requested a delay. So at the moment we have them penciled in for March, but obviously that may change again. We also may well have the community delivery strategy, but we're not quite sure. That's why it's not actually there. So it could be actually quite a busy meeting. So we're going to wait for a little bit and see what comes through, and then hopefully draw up an agenda which is manageable and we don't end up going too late in the night. There's just one other item that I wanted to make you aware of that we will bring to the March meeting, which is an outline draft agenda for the 2022-23 municipal year. And the purpose for doing that is that I was quite mindful of when I became chair last year, and we have a committee that is pretty well all new members. It was actually quite hard to get agendas together and get momentum. So what we thought might be helpful for officers as well as for members of CEP, whoever that might be, and the chair of CEP, is to have something that's at least in draft that they could then either accept, change, whatever, but at least they had something to start with. And we will also look to have a meaningful June agenda ready as well for people to pick up. So that was the purpose of that. So I think I've asked if Ellie and Ian Boll could put together a short paper that also includes all the service areas that CEP cover. They're in the Constitution, but they're quite hard to find. And I just thought that it might help members think about what they might like to see coming to CEP in the future. So it could be, I hope, a fruitful discussion about meaningful topics that members would find useful going forward, now that we've all had a bit of experience of attending the committee. So does that sound okay for the sort of immediate future? Is that all right? Generally nods. Yeah, good. One thing that's not here is I just wanted to say that equality, diversity and inclusion, we are now expecting for September 2022. And the ecological action plan, we're just checking out when that would come, because when we were presented with that, I can't remember whether it was November or December now, we were expecting an action plan to come to CEP in the new year. So I don't know what that means now. So I don't know whether that's going to be March or June, but we will follow that up. And hopefully at the next meeting, at the March meeting, we will have sketched out a pretty good agenda for June. And we can have a discussion for what members would like to see over the next year, which hopefully will help you and the future committee. Anything else on forward plan, or shall we move to the task and finish group? Everybody happy? So task and finish group, thank you very much to Ellie for arranging who is on it. So we have councillors Wooldridge, James, Tilbury, myself, Testane, Jeans and Bowes, and the first meeting has been scheduled for the 26th of January. So hopefully we'll have some feedback from that meeting for the March meeting. Okay, so unless anyone has anything else they wish to say, I think we can thank Ellie and for her support and democratic services, and thank you everybody for your participation, and we can close for tonight. Is that okay?